Welcome to the Tarot Tapestry, a weaving of self-discovery, where three tarot mavens put their heads and hearts together to offer their wisdom and insights about the tarot. We hope that you find this helpful in your personal journey to self-discovery and growth.
Join us as we explore ways to use tarot for self-reflection and self-correction.
Together, we'll discover new ways to use tarot to weave threads of understanding into the tapestry of your life.
Hey everyone, we're here on the Tarot Tapestry today. I'm with my partners, Kate and Linda. How are you guys doing?
Just fine.
Doing well. Yeah,
Doing
excited
well.
about this episode.
It's cold where all of us are right now. I know that, right? So, we are going to today. We're going to discuss ways to use tarot for emotional regulation. We'll start off. We'll each talk a little bit about what it means to us, and then we'll talk about how to use tarot to gain more insight about your emotions and what got them all stirred up. So when I think about this, I don't picture myself in the middle of a conflict or a very high tension situation going, wait, let me stop right now and go get my cards. I usually do readings like this for myself once everything has kind of, it's over-ish, but I'm just still very upset or, sad, whatever it is with what's happened. And it's when I am having trouble disconnecting myself from, it's what's already happened. I'm having trouble, kind of down regulating my nervous system when, if I'm really, really angry or, and it just helps me kind of sort through my feelings and like figure out it helps me to get a little bit of distance from something that's got me real riled up. Like when you name a thing, you kind of put like, I'm over here, and then, that's angry. I'm angry. That's what I can call that. And so now I know what I'm dealing with. And once you kind of start down that path of figuring out what has got you so upset, and it's not nothing. I know that a lot of us, when we're angry or sad, we try to just kind of ignore it. Oh, it's nothing. It's fine. I'll walk it off. It'll be fine. But that's really not very good for us. If we do it all the time, it can really kind of build up and get very, very heavy. And you can find yourself lashing out for, unrelated reasons to people who aren't even part of the situation. So, like I said, this can help you figure out what it is that's going on. And then once you figure out what it is that's going on, you can decide how you want to deal with it. Like sometimes when you're upset and there's a crappy situation, you just have to accept that this is how it is. And you have to decide how you're going to take care of yourself in that situation. Like you're probably not just going to suddenly not be mad anymore or sad or afraid, but how can you best take care of yourself the way things are? But sometimes you find out that maybe there are things you can do in the future to avoid the same thing coming around again. You can have a conversation with yourself, with your therapist, with whoever you're angry with once everybody has settled down, and their pants aren't on fire anymore. But it's just a really nice way to kind of sit down and check in with yourself and really look at the real situation in there, because it's hard to parse all of that out when you're very upset, like in the heat of the moment. But if the more you can become aware of it and sort of, instead of just, well, that happened and going on with your life, sit down and just with you and you, or you and a therapist, or you and a really good friend, and kind of figure it out. So next time you feel maybe upset or provoked in that particular way, you are like, okay, I know I know what this feels like. I feel a little more prepared to navigate it again. So
Yeah, and that's when you think about it, sometimes the same situations, like you said before, can come up over and over again, maybe just slightly different, but they still elicit that same response. So taking care of it now and learning to deal with it, is going, because usually we get upset with things and we kind of get upset about the same things that generally seems to happen. So, getting that like not under control, but putting a lot of attention to it will help you in the future not react those ways.
Right.
Yeah,
And when you the big what am I trying to say? When you do this kind of work, the more impactful thing you can start with. Like, don't push yourself really, really hard and decide you're going to fix everything and, regress yourself back to you when you're 2 years old. And, just kind of deal with the biggest thing that you can deal with right now and decide how you're going to, you know, get a grip on that.
absolutely.
How,
Don't want to do too much at one time.
right? How
No, you
about you,
don't.
Linda?
Well, in thinking about this, I always find it helpful for myself to kind of go and get a definition of what the subject is. And so I was reading a little bit and scrolling a little bit and going through this, and I kind of wrote down a little definition of what emotional regulation is, because it's not a phrase that I personally have been particularly familiar with until the last couple of years. But it makes sense. Okay, so I just jotted it down. The emotional regulation is the ability to respond to the demands of your life experience with a range of emotions, but in a way that's socially acceptable and sufficiently flexible to allow for spontaneous reactions, as well as the ability to delay spontaneous reactions as needed. And so I'm thinking about a couple of things. A character that popped into my head to kind of illustrate this, because I just finished watching Ted Lasso. I've been watching Ted Lasso for the last few weeks, and I was so sad to have it finally come to an end. But the character of Roy Kent comes to mind when I think about emotional regulation. And
Yes,
the things
totally.
that the things that he went through, and the way that he learned how to ask for help and kind of not control, but to be aware of some of the emotions. And I think one of the really telling scenes was when the Kit boy Nate was telling the characters, he was telling the players what he thought, and Ted made him tell him himself instead of doing it. And he said a line that I'll never forget. He said, "You used to run like you were angry at the grass, and you've lost it." And I just thought, wow, that is so descriptive. He's angry at the grass. He's running so hard and he's so determined. And he said, you need to find out where that anger has gone, because it's not on the field anymore. And you need to figure out how to either get it back to the field or release it in your life, or it's going to do bad things to you. And I think that was kind of where the turning point for that character was. Maybe he did hear those words and realized that there was some stuff going on, and he didn't want it to affect his life badly. And so, as difficult as it was for him over the course of the rest of the show, he worked on himself. And even though he still was gruff and grumpy and it's still Roy Kent, he was different. He was better. And I think that was a really good example of how he was able to maybe experience some emotional regulation in that.
I love that
Excellent.
example, Linda, because that was
Yeah.
like his character was spot on. That was like a man who was carrying around a lot of just anger and aggression and not having any clue about what was going on inside of him and how his behavior was affecting, those around him. And
Right.
it's not an easy thing. And I think in our society, it's more so even it's more so difficult for men in our society than it is for women, although women do still have, there are regulations,
Anger
rules on what
anger
women
is hard for
can.
women. I mean, it's not hard for women to feel. I mean, obviously women feel anger, but it's not, we're not, quote, allowed to express it the
We're
way
not
men are
encouraged to
allowed to
express it.
express anger, which is basically the only emotion they're really allowed to
Yes,
express acceptably. You know, they can
right.
cry if they're mad, maybe, but even that is not, tears are a no-no, even if they're furious.
You
And
can
I
cry
know
if your best
me,
friend dies, but it must be one tear only.
yes, one tear and maybe a lip
Yeah.
quiver.
Yeah.
And it's
But
very, it's very sad and it's disheartening
It is.
that, especially for males, that there's that stigma for them
and
to
I
show
think
any feelings other than aggression.
part of the problem with emotional regulation, achieving it, is that we feel like we're not allowed to express those emotions.
Mhm.
That regulation means that we suppress it. We all have to become Vulcans and
Yeah,
not show
no.
emotion, and that's a regular, but that's not really regulating it. It's being able to express it appropriately for the
In a way
situation.
that doesn't hurt you or anybody else.
Right. I mean, if you're in a Broncos game and your team is winning, then yes, you can jump up and scream and raise your arms and
Sure,
honk.
yeah. That's
That's
fun.
acceptable. It might not be, that might not be, or that level of
Expression.
participation, if you want to call it that, might not be appropriate in a boardroom where they say you've just achieved your fourth quarter goals. You know,
Yeah, you
everybody
don't get
might
up and
clap,
throw
but to
your
jump up and down and do all that might be a little inappropriate in that setting. So I think you have to figure out, what level
it's
of
how to find your
emotion.
own dials.
Right,
It's
exactly.
you figure out where your own dials are, and then you go, oh, I get to decide. Oh, this is me in a lot of these situations. And like we talked about when we were discussing doing this episode, your body is an animal. Like your body is going to react the way it reacts to everything, but your brain is where you use your brain, you train your brain to recognize those situations or to see them coming sometimes even, so you can start to
Right.
avoid them altogether if that's what's
Right.
best
Like
for you.
if you're in a work situation where
And I'm
your
not
boss
talking
is.
about horrible situations
No,
where
but if
people
you're in a
are
work situation where your boss is dressing you down and you have anxiety about your performance or something like that, and you're flooded with that fight or flight hormones, your body doesn't realize, your lizard brain doesn't realize that there's not some huge animal coming at you. It's the same reaction. Your brain has to say, okay, I'm not in physical danger, although maybe with some bosses you could be, but I'm in an office. I'm physically safe. I just feel this way because we have a fraught relationship, or this is the third time I've done this, and I've been trying my best to not do it, or whatever the situation is. Your body is still giving you those hormones, the adrenaline, the whatever, and you might want to turn around and run out of the room and flee, but you can't. So your brain has to tell you, okay, calm down, take a breath, discuss it, say, I need a moment, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, whatever it is. But you're not going to run out and jump off the cliff because you're afraid of the dinosaur or the saber-toothed tiger or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's not an easy and to work on it, going back to like what Angie said, it takes a lot of time. And I think, some people, and especially in this day and age where everything needs to be like quick, done quickly, like that instant gratification, you're
Right.
looking for, oh, okay, so in this one situation, I can examine how I'm feeling and my mind can not rationalize it, but my brain can do its job and it can help me understand the situation and how I'm feeling. And my brain knows that when I walk into that situation the next time, I'm not going to react this way. Like logically, that, but your body and your subconscious or your unconscious hasn't fully accepted that yet.
Yeah,
You
it
Right.
know,
takes a long
so
time for all
yeah,
of those things to sync up. And so it
Right.
feels like
exactly.
it feels really weird at first and really scary. And sometimes it can feel really bad.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm going to give you,
so
I'll give you an example from my own self. Um, my grandson is close to his aunt and uncle who live very close to us, and they've been good for him. His uncle is a really good man. A great example since he doesn't have a relationship with his dad, who is that uncle's brother. They've been very helpful. They do a lot for him, and I like them. And we've hung out. I go over there for Christmas and holidays and other stuff. And when I first started going over there more frequently, this was after my last relationship broke up and he and I were living together and he was going to high school. Um, their relationship, aunt and uncle's relationship, was kind of, they had this banter that they did. And it was kind of like the aunt would kind of say something about somebody she was at work with, and the uncle would say, "Oh, your new boyfriend," or whatever. And then she'd be like, "Ah, it's not my boyfriend. You know how that is. What are you talking about?" Blah, blah, blah. They'd have this banter. And for a while it really made me uncomfortable. I didn't say anything, but it made me physically uncomfortable. And wasn't sure why, because I knew it was their banter. I knew they weren't serious. I knew he wasn't really jealous. I knew she wasn't really going out on him, all that stuff. I knew all that. But still, I was very uncomfortable. And then I realized one day, and I don't know where I got this realization from, but it just kind of hit me that my first marriage was very abusive emotionally, sometimes physically, but emotionally very abusive. And my first husband was one of those people who was insanely jealous. So that if I was 5 minutes back from the grocery store when I said I would be back at 2:30 and I was back at 2:35, I was obviously out screwing somebody. If I mentioned a male coworker from a job, I was obviously having an affair with that person. Obviously, anything. And I realized that I was having a relatively mild, but still a PTSD response to that.
I
That,
think that that happens. Those were all feelings you weren't allowed to express. You weren't allowed to
right.
do anything about them. So when you see reminders, that's what this kind of examination, self-examination is really good for.
And once I realized that, and and I wasn't in the situation, I wasn't at their house or anything, I just had been thinking about it. And once I realized that and became clear, it was like, wow, that makes so much sense. And now their conversations don't bother me at all because
Yeah,
I figured out what it was that bothered me didn't have anything to do with them. It
that's
had
the
to do
thing.
with experience that I had had in my past. And so once I figured that out, I mean, there really wasn't anything to do about it, but just the knowledge of it solved the problem.
Yeah.
Because I'm divorced. He's possibly dead. I don't know where he is if he's not dead. I have nothing to do with him, and it's fine. But I
Hmm.
still have, leftovers from that
Yeah.
from that relationship that I needed to deal with.
And
So
it's nice because knowledge, right? Self-knowledge can really help to kind of ease your dis-ease with it all. Not that
yeah,
it's going to get rid of the feelings that you have associated with those memories of your past with your ex-husband, but understanding why you react the way that you do really helps to bring a little sense of comfort to a
yeah,
situation, and it allows you to approach a situation and see it in a much different way, and that's really important. And, to say that those feelings may not stir up every once in a while because it's something that's very deep seated and it's almost like an unconscious thing, and it might come out, but there's always that feeling of, like I understand, like understanding can
yeah.
really make you feel really good,
It,
Hmm.
it did. It
about
totally
things.
did because I realized that it did not have anything to do with their relationship. Their relationship is fine. They've been married for 20 some years. Their kids are the same age, or Elijah's in between their oldest and their youngest. So they've been married for 25 or 26 years. And together longer than that, and they're fine. It was, again, totally my reaction in reaction to something that had nothing to actually do with what was going on in the room that I was in at the time. It was a room 30 years ago.
Right. That's such a really good example of why it's worth the discomfort of sitting with this, whatever's stirred up in you until you can identify it. Because
Because
like
it
you
may
said,
not have
once you
anything to
figured
do.
it out, it went away. And
Yeah, and
now,
it may not have anything to do with the thing that actually triggered it.
yeah,
It may not,
exactly.
you know.
Exactly. And that's why,
Which is usually the case. It's
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
usually the case.
when you have a disproportionately vehement reaction to something, it it could be, I mean, it could be the culmination of things, I want to say TTS, that things that have built up with a person or a job or something that you haven't responded to, and then finally you just blow your cool. But a lot of
I have
times,
done that
yeah,
before.
a
I
lot
have
of
burned those
times,
freaking bridges.
I know it doesn't have anything to do with the current situation, except that was just that last straw that
Yeah,
that sent
it's
you over
like that is the last time for
the
me. Goodbye, everyone. Yeah. And I'm not terribly proud of some of the things I've done at the end of some situations,
Well, I
but
mean,
I have
and
examined myself and I won't do anything like that again because now I know not to take jobs that I understand on a deep level are going to do that to me again.
right,
Like
right.
at some point I had to sit down and go, oh, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew it
Well,
and I
I
did it
worked for that company for
anyway.
8 years, and I didn't know it was going to do that, and it didn't really do that until they changed the platforms, and I ended up with that boss, and that was the last. I want to say that was the last
Hmm.
3 years I was there, but
Hmm.
anyway, yeah.
So what does emotional regulation mean for you, Kate? See, those were really good examples of times when Linda and I would have benefited from this tarot reading, this tarot spread that we're going to share here soon.
So I was, thinking a lot about this, and as most of our listeners know, I'm a teacher and I teach elementary school. And a big part of our curriculum is we have a social emotional learning curriculum, and we happen to use the Yale RULER method. And we started in schools are doing it in like 3K and pre-K. I happen to teach kindergarten, where we teach children how to recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate their emotions. And the acronym RULER is that, right? So the R is recognize your emotions, the U is to understand your emotions, the L is to label your emotions, the E is to express them, and then the R is to regulate them. And in kindergarten, we use various tools to help the kids do this. And we have what I think is really cool for kids. It's a mood meter. And the mood meter is broken up into four quadrants. And, the upper left is red, the upper right is yellow, the lower left is blue, and the lower right is green. And each of those colors are associated with certain emotions, right? So at a kindergarten level, very basic, red is anger, frustration, irritation, right? Yellow is excitement, super happy. Green is like calm and relaxed, and blue might be tired or sad, right? Just very basic emotions. And also on this mood meter, there is a level for your energy level and a place for how pleasant or unpleasant you are. And what you try to get the kids to do is to think about how their body feels, right? Because so many times people have difficulty labeling their emotions. They don't know. But if you were to ask somebody, how is your body feeling? The majority of the time they could tell you, they could say, my fists are clenching. I have this rise of energy in my body. I don't feel good inside. I want to hit something or I want to kick something, right? Those are all ways that we express our emotions. So we teach the children how to to recognize those things. And we'll use various situations in the classroom because lots of times kids will hurt each other's feelings. They're 5 years old. It's all about them. They want everything. So we'll take certain situations. We use a lot of read alouds where we'll talk about characters and how characters are feelings. And we go through this whole big thing. And, the more that I work on that with my students, the more I realize that I don't really know a lot of it. Like, when we first had this program and started using it, I'm like, oh, I got this. I think this is wonderful. I think I'm pretty good with my emotions. And I confused me having the knowledge and understanding my emotions to me being a very emotional person. I consider myself a very highly sensitive person. And I thought, well, because I'm highly sensitive, I must have a really good grasp on my feelings because no, absolutely not. It's so not true. And what I'm learning is that if you want to learn about emotions and be able to regulate them, you have to go to the basics, right? And if your basics for
Mhm.
people can be I'm angry, I'm happy, I'm calm, or I'm sad, then you stick with basic emotions like that because there are people out there that don't have the names for how they're feeling, but you can get angry can be like there's a lot of other emotions that can fall under angry, but that can be like
Right.
a good starting point. So like we do that in kindergarten. And I know for me, ever since we started using this program, I think we're in our 5th year, I have really learned so much about me and how I regulate, how I label them, and how now I can use what I've learned to help me deal with situations, especially at work, because it can be you can go through a lot of different emotions at work. So
Yeah,
it has been very beneficial,
great.
for me. And I would
And it's great
recommend.
that that your school district is doing this so
Mhm.
early
It
It's a
is.
big
because
push. It's a big
yeah,
push in a lot of the districts in New York City for some type of social emotional learning, program. And there are various ones, and they all hit the same components. I mean, it's like a whole big thing. But I would like suggest to our listeners, if this is something that you do want to work on, that maybe you do a little search yourself on this tool called the mood meter. And there's
Yeah.
various forms of them out there to kind of help you get an idea of what the names of emotions are and where they fall in this chart, and an understanding of your energy level. Like, do I have a lot of energy and I'm very unpleasant? No, that's going to put you in the red. Do I
Mhm.
have, very low energy and I'm very unpleasant? That's going to put you in a blue quadrant, right? You're tired, you're sad, you're depressed, you're mopey, you're bored.
Right.
And that's like a
yeah,
good way to start if somebody, really wanted to dig in.
So we don't have the colored chart, but I think your ruler, the acronym there, very elegantly expresses what I kind of clumsily tried to express when we were in the planning stages of this
Mhm.
episode. I think maybe
yeah.
that we should pull cards along with that. How does it go? Recognizing.
It's recognizing, understanding,
Understand, label.
labeling, expressing, and regulating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Whenever it's time to, I think we should do that instead of the thing that we had planned. Is that okay? Is it too late to change our minds?
Oh, hey,
Never
you
too
know what? We
late.
can do what we feel like
It's
doing in
our
the moment.
podcast. We can do whatever we want to,
That's right.
and I
Okay.
say that unemotionally.
So I'm sorry. What are we doing?
Did you want to pull cards now?
Well,
For your ruler acronym, or did you? I'm very interested in hearing what else you have to say about this.
I was trying to relate like emotions with the tarot and thinking to myself, well, in my own tarot journey, and when I pull the cards, am I using the cards to help me specifically with my emotions? So it kind of took me a little while to understand how I connect the tarot to my emotions. And I started to kind of like come up with a little exercise that I wanted to try just to kind of help me better understand it. And what I
Yeah,
thought
because
about was,
I think a lot of times when we pull, like, say for instance, we have a habit or we have a practice of having our morning coffee, you do our pull, and you just say, some people say, well, what do I need to know about the day? And they pull a card. That's not that's not emotional regulation. That's just getting familiar with your cards or trying to plan your day ahead or whatever it is that you do. I don't think that every time you go to your cards, you're trying to regulate your emotions.
no, you're not. I don't
So,
mean that you're going every time to regulate your emotions. I, for myself, just wanted to see how I just wanted to like play around with
To
it and just
understand
right,
kind of
your
see,
right.
yeah,
self
like
more, yeah.
understand, just
And you
how
said you had come up
emotions
with an
fall into
exercise?
things. Yeah, so
Yeah.
how it started was in our tarot diagnosis symposium. Shannon, she created a spread for the new year of who I was, who I am, and who I am becoming.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, so I pulled all my cards, and for the card of who I am becoming, it was the Wheel of Fortune. And I said, oh, wouldn't it be really interesting to see where my emotions or how my emotions can play into who I am becoming? And I started to look at the key words to describe what the Wheel of Fortune was in my guidebook. And then I started to think about, well, how do I feel about this? So, like, one of the biggest things with the Wheel of Fortune is change, right? Things are going to change, and there are certain things that we just can't control. So I started to think, well, how do I feel about this idea about control? What has been my past experience about being in control? What are my emotions that stir up when I think about not having control? Or what are my emotions that relate to change? You know, am I okay with smaller little changes? Do I get anxious? Do I get worried? Do I have that fear of the future and what's going to come because I can't control it? And in my mind, it was like getting an understanding of how I felt about all of that. I thought was a good thing for me because then I can start exploring that a little bit more so that when things do happen that I don't have control over, at least I have a little bit of a better understanding about how I feel and why I feel that way. It's almost like, I don't know, doing future work rather than work in the present moment.
I think
So
it's
I
kind
just
of
found
like
that for me,
pathfinding,
Well, there's nothing wrong
sort of.
with being prepared.
Hmm.
yeah,
You don't,
that's
I mean,
just, yeah.
you don't know what's going to happen, but there's nothing. It's like people talk about being aware of your surroundings when, particularly for women, when they're walking to their car or whatever. And that's great. But the thing is, if you don't imagine and I'm not saying this to scare anybody or to perseverate on something, but if you don't imagine yourself in a situation where you're actually being attacked, and think about what you might do, then if it happens, it's going to take you, even if you're aware that, oh, there's nobody around and I've got my keys and you're doing all the things. But if you don't think about what would I do if somebody grabbed my arm or tried to take my purse or whatever, because if you don't think about your body moving a certain way or whatever, it's going to take you so by surprise, you won't be able to do anything.
Yeah, this work is like emotional self-defense that
Right,
way.
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty. So we
To the
are just pulling a card for recognizing,
Well, no,
understanding, and
let's
no,
do your little one. Or are we going to do the ruler?
Oh, what was your, you said you had an exercise?
Yeah, what was the one that
oh,
you?
Oh,
Oh, I thought
she
you.
was, I'm sorry, Kate was talking about the things she does to understand her
Oh,
emotions, not
okay,
really to
okay.
regulate.
I'm sorry. I thought you had something
Right.
that a specific thing that you did.
no, but I will just add something because it just made me think about it that if you are, and the what I had just described about what I did with the Wheel of Fortune card was that pulling a card, if you have a situation at work and something really bothered you and you come home, you can always pull a card and say, how do I feel about this particular situation? And you can look at that card and think about the key words of that card and a basic description of it and kind of pull from there some of the emotions that might be or feelings that might be attached to it and kind of look at those and say, okay, so which one of these am I really feeling? Because many times we can have that one emotion that masks deeper emotions that are inside. And sometimes
Right.
we need to get deeper in to understand those other emotions because that one that's masking it is sometimes just, it's not the right emotion. Doesn't reach the core of why you feel the way that you feel, if
I'm
that
going to
makes
bring
sense.
up Ted Lasso again because at the end, when the guy is writing the book and Roy Kent says, don't talk to this guy, don't, at the end, towards the end, we find out that the man who was writing the book, had written a bad review, I guess you call it a bad review of his playing when Roy Kent was 17. And
Mhm.
it really messed with him at 17. But now it's literally almost 20 years later, and he's still carrying that clip around in his
Yeah.
wallet. And so underneath everything else, we've got this 17-year-old young man who had his feelings hurt by a sports writer, and he's basically carried that grudge with him all that time.
Yeah, exactly. And Linda, you're going to be very happy to know that another season is coming.
Seriously?
Yay!
They are going to do it's third season. Yes.
Fourth season.
Fourth season. It's coming
Actually,
back.
I thought maybe they would do it because Keeley brought the Notebook in. It's with the women's league. I thought maybe they would do a season where they would have the women's soccer.
At least that's what I heard. Anything can happen in,
Yeah, in TV land.
movie, TV land. Yes, anything can happen.
So I pulled my cards. I'm not particularly upset about anything. So I figured that I would just read this as if I was giving a reading to someone who came to me and said, listen, I'm just feeling dysregulated and I don't know really how to think. So the first one was recognize, right? For recognize was the first star.
Yes, they are for recognize your emotions.
I pulled the death card reversed, and I don't always go with reversals when I pull them, but everything else was upright. So, and I shuffle usually between pulls. So I just kind of thought maybe that was a little interesting. And for that, I would say to recognize that maybe you're feeling upset because you're really resistant to a definite change that's coming that is beyond your control. I think that's what death reversed can mean when you're talking about I don't feel great. And the understanding
Understanding your emotions. Yeah.
I pulled the Fool. So I think to understand this, that one of the reasons it's so upsetting is maybe this has never happened to this person before. They've always felt like they had a pretty predictable arc in their life. And so something that is happening that they can't do anything about is just like a whole new ball game. And they really are just they feel like the fool that's already sort of fallen off right now, I think. And they're just screaming on the way down. And the L was
Label emotions.
I pulled the 8 of Cups. So I would say that is like, I want to get the hell out of here. That's what I feel like doing. I just want to run for the hills. I don't want to do this. I'm afraid and I'm exhausted and exasperated and I just can't anymore.
And like avoidant too, right? You want to avoid
yeah, like I
the
don't even want to
situation.
think about it. I feel like I've done everything I can do and I'm just disgusted and I'm just gonna leave my mess on the beach and walk up into the hills there.
And then the next one is E, so expressing your emotions.
So I pulled the Ace of Swords for expressing your emotions, which I
Oh,
think is, it always makes me think of sitting down with your journal and writing just whatever is in your head. Just write it out, express it, talk, talk to other people, maybe if you think that will help, but just really like express it. Record your voice if you're not everybody likes to sit down and write, but maybe go for a walk and talk into your phone recorder, your
yeah,
voice
like a
recorder
big
on your
brain
phone.
dump. Just
Yeah,
dump it all out.
just
Just get everything that you're
just get
thinking.
everything out.
Yep.
And then the R for
Regulate your emotions.
regulate. Why would I know that word for this episode? I pulled the moon. So I
Oh, ooh.
think
Well,
in
what?
order, the moon.
Oh, the moon. Yeah.
Mhm. And I'm using the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the classic pack here. And so I think to regulate this feeling of like I just want to run away, to get it out first, and then you know how the moon goes through phases. You can't always see everything with the moon out. Be a little patient with yourself about figuring out how to navigate this because it does look, I mean, death reverse to me says something sudden and unavoidable. So you're not, just do your best to do your best. Be honest about how you feel, be authentic in your reactions. Try not to hide anything. I know the moon is kind of a card of hiding, but you also don't have to show everything all at once. It's okay to feel afraid. The moon can be kind of a scary card. There's, wild animals howling at the moon and a big crawdad or lobster or something looks almost like a scorpion coming out of the water. I think it is supposed to be a scorpion, probably not a crab
Yeah.
or a lobster.
I think it's supposed to be a crawfish.
Is it? Okay,
Yeah,
well,
because
whatever.
scorpions don't live in the water. They're more desert creatures.
It's a water insect of some
Have I
sort.
had, do any of them have a lobster that comes out or looks like, or is that a crawfish?
I don't know
I
what
I
it
think it's
keep
a
is.
thinking
crawfish. I mean, it could
oh,
be a
okay.
lobster, I guess, but
I don't know why I
I,
keep thinking
I
of
would
that like a
eat it, but
very,
I don't want to see it when it's alive. I would eat it if it was boiled and had lemon juice on it, probably. But the moon card as a card of regulation, it means to go slow, to you don't try to rush through anything. Understand that this is scary and it's okay that it's scary and you don't have to try and hurry through
and
it.
things go in
Just
cycles. Things go
exactly.
in cycles too. So
Yeah.
if you
So
don't get it this go around, you can get it the next go around.
mhm. So
yeah,
that's the advice I
that
would
was
give.
great, Angie.
Thank you.
I
So
don't know if I can do that as quickly as you did
you don't have to do it.
with my
You
pulls.
do
So
everything the way you do
I,
it. You're fantastic.
I'm
yeah,
going
I
to put
mean,
Linda on the spot and say, all right, Linda, you're
that's okay.
next.
I pulled my cards while Angie was talking. So it's a very interesting, totally different. None of this synchronicity like we had with the other thing we did. So the card that I got for the recognize is the Chariot. And I thought that was interesting because I think sometimes when you feel like you're on the right track and then something comes in and just pushes you off the road or pushes you you kind of have to know, oh, did I hit some black ice, or is there another driver that's coming up on side of me, or did I just lose focus and drive off the road to the shoulder, that kind of thing. So I think the Chariot kind of encourages us to look at where we might be excessively controlling or over control,
Mm,
because sometimes if we are in that mode of over controlling or feeling like we have to have those reins really tight, if something else comes along that maybe needs you to let go of it or needs you to pull back a little bit with your tight fist, you feel threatened that you're going to lose something. And so that can kind of
mhm.
throw you off the road too. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it. And again, I'm using the regular Rider-Waite deck too. So the guy who's driving the Chariot looks like he's encased in cement, sort of from the waist down. The Chariot looks really clunky and heavy. And so that's another thing that you might want to think about as, am I so stuck in this way of doing something that the thought of having to do it a different way is really threatening me, and I'm feeling upset about that. So lots of things to ask, lots of questions to ask around that card. So the card that I pulled for understanding is Four of Cups.
Oh,
So that's interesting too, because this person, this card is interesting to me because it can be a lot of things. This person can be taking a time out and taking some time to rest and think about what's going on. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here comes the cup out of the sky as like inspiration. Oh, maybe because I relaxed, I allowed my control to go down, my mental control to let go for a minute, and I got an idea on how to deal with it. The other thing is this person could be pouting. They're looking down at the three cups that are on the ground, like they're leaning against a tree. Maybe they're just over it and they're not receptive to this other cup that's coming out of the blue. And so you have to kind of think about, where are you in this emotional spectrum? Are you having inspiration because you're resting, or are you resisting having inspiration or resisting another suggestion because you're out pouting because you don't want to change? And
yeah.
so you have to think about where you are on that arc. For the labeling, this is a little interesting, so you guys feel free to jump in. I got Four of Swords, so 2 4s in a row. And I think here sometimes, in order to label the emotions that you're feeling, you do have to step back a little bit. Sometimes you're so in it and you're so overwrought or worried about what's going to happen or how somebody's going to react or any of that, whatever the situation is, that you don't know what it is that you're feeling, like having a panic attack. You know that your heart is beating fast and you're clammy and maybe you're afraid you're having a heart attack. But once you can get away from it, once you can calm down, you can say, oh no, there's nothing physically wrong with me. I was just so overwhelmed by this situation that's how I reacted. And maybe that's not what I want to do in the future. And so sometimes pulling back, taking time out, taking a rest, just doing some breathing, meditation, take a nap for God's sake.
Yeah,
That
get
can
some
help.
rest.
That can help you to be able to label what you were feeling in that moment better than trying to do it when you're so overwrought and so fraught about it. The one I got for expressing, Page of Pentacles.
Oh,
So the pages to me are always about a little bit of taking a time out to play. So I think Page of Pentacles here for expressing would be to go out and maybe kick a ball around or have a good walk or go to the river and be by the water. Something that you can do for your pages are resources and things like that, but it's also your body. Something that you can do to distract your mind by doing something physical. I think when we are emotionally dysregulated or we're emotionally upset about something, we're really into our heads. Yes, we're having physical reactions or physiological reactions because we have adrenaline and that kind of thing that we have no control over, but we're totally in our heads about how we're feeling this. And I think sometimes if you can go out, go to your favorite place and watch the sunset, just go to the zoo, look at the animals, play with your dog, that kind of thing. Just get your mind off of it completely by doing something with your body. And I think that is a good way to express those emotions. And also
there's
just,
one thing I'd like to add to that too. So this
yeah, sure.
idea of your physical body is to find a healthier alternative to release any kind of more negative feelings like the aggression or the irritation that you have, like playing a sport, jumping on
Right.
the treadmill, going for a walk, going for a swim. Like, take maybe what you want to do when you're angry and you're feeling all of this is to exert it, but in a more healthier way.
Absolutely.
And that's a
I was gonna
good
say,
way to
go to the
express.
driving range or the batting cage if you want to
Yeah.
really hit something.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Swing that
absolutely.
baseball bat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And so
I
for
really love, oh, I'm sorry,
oh,
go ahead.
go
I
ahead.
was
No,
just
go
gonna say, I
ahead.
really like that your reading had both sides of taking care of yourself, like rest, and then if you're still feeling, excited
Agitated.
to
Yeah,
go out and move or, do something with your body. So
right.
you
And so for the final card, the regulate, is it regulate?
Yes.
Okay. I got justice. So
Ooh.
I think that a lot of times when people, I know for me, we get upset about things, there's an element of something is not fair, something is not right. Um, either you're angry about that or upset about that for yourself, or maybe you're upset about that for somebody else that's in it, that something happened and you're thinking this is just not a right situation. And I think that when you maybe go through all these other steps, you can calm down, you can realize what it is that you were upset about in the first place. And then once you have those two things, when you're calmer and you know what your the emotion was, then you can work towards solutions that will bring about a balance and bring about the situation, right the wrong that was what got you so upset in the first place. And so, that I thought that was really cool.
I really like that too with the justice card and thinking about once you go through all of the other like recognizing, understanding, labeling, and expressing, and then you get to regulating, it's like, now you can approach the situation in with a clearer mind, and say,
Yes,
okay, I've done lots of work and now I can handle this situation. Even though I may feel like there's an injustice going on, I can still walk in there with like a clear head and
right,
understand that, I'm not going to allow what I am hearing and perceiving to affect how I'm
right.
going to
You're going to be
speak
able
or
to
how I'm going to act.
keep the scales in balance for that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's like being very impartial
Yeah.
when you walk in, and that's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's
Being
it's
not.
not,
impartial.
especially when you're upset. It's not easy. But
Yeah,
yeah,
so that
sometimes
that
it is
takes
the
a
best
lot.
course of action, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely it is. Ooh, okay, I'm feeling the pressure, ladies, I'm feeling the pressure here. Okay. So for recognizing emotions, I got the Page of Cups, which I thought was like, oh my God, the Page of Cups. And I love this. And I'm using the Good Fortune Tarot. And in this deck, it's this big, huge cup that's on a beach, and this big fish that's out, and there is a person standing next to the cup on their tippy toes, holding the top of the cup and looking directly at the fish. They're on a beach with the ocean behind them. And it made me think of this sense of curiosity about wanting to understand these emotions that you have and how they affect the things that you do in your life, and how these emotions affect your relationships, right, with other people, how they affect even your creativity and things that you want to do, so having that curiosity of wanting to learn about your emotions and how they can help you with your self growth, right? How they can help you in reaching your authentic self, I think is really important. And it's to me, it's showing like a fun way to do it, like being curious. It doesn't have to have this feeling of, oh my God, I got to think about my emotions. This is like so shitty. Why do I freaking have to do this? I don't like to do this. But, maybe looking at it from a curious perspective, like, yeah, like I'm really interested in doing this,
Yeah,
because
being
I think that
open
can
to
help.
whatever it
Yeah.
is that you're going to learn by giving
Definitely.
yourself that chance to listen. to
Yeah,
your
and
goal.
having that positive outlook about it, like being optimistic about it as opposed to being pessimistic about it. And then understanding your emotions was the Queen of Pentacles. Like the Queen of Pentacles to me is a person who cares for her family, takes care of things that need to be taken care of. She takes care of her home. She takes care of herself at her job. She takes care of herself, right? She's a person who looks at herself as I am a priority, my family is a priority, my home is a priority, and she works hard to kind of keep that all in balance. So when you think about understanding your emotions, you want to be able to know how your emotions are going to affect this stability that you have in your life. How are my emotions going to affect how I treat my children, how I do my job? Are these understanding my emotions are going to help improve my home life, my work life, my social life, and knowing that I can learn about this to kind of help me maintain that balance in my life. And then for labeling the emotions, it was the star card. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, it's going to kind of sound farty, but it's like being guided to truly understanding how you're feeling.
Did you say
Like
farty?
I said farty. Yeah, it's going to sound kind of farty. I don't know, kind of like I don't know. That's
That's
the
not a
only
word
word
I
that
would have
came
used
to
for
I
mind.
that.
love the star for that of being very accepting of what you find and understanding that if that you can handle what you find. Like if you need healing, that's available. If you need to cool it off, that's available. If you need to just
Yeah.
rest, I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, like there's hope, like it's guiding you to understanding the true nature of your feelings. Maybe
It's a
going back to
gentle, it's
what,
a gentle card.
yeah,
It's a gentle
absolutely. It
card.
doesn't have to be this
So it's
like I
kind of
was just
like
saying before with Angie, it doesn't have to be this like, oh my God, I got to deal with my emotions and understand them and oh, I don't want to do this. And you start to feel like you're already becoming very negative about it, and the star
it's
card
just like
is kind of like,
come into this soft light and come in here
yeah,
where the water is and just dip your toes in. It's okay. You don't have to submerge yourself. You can just be here. And,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and you can slowly follow that path, like the light is
Right.
there, the star is always guiding you, there's hope. It'll take some time, but just stay on that path and continue, you know, looking towards that light as being that is where I'm gonna receive or become aware of my true emotions. And then the next one was express, and that was the Ace of Cups. Um,
Hmm.
and
Uh,
in this deck, I love that the cup is in the water, but it's sitting on top of a fish, the same fish that you saw in the Page of Cups. And then it
nice.
has the water. What do they call that?
Fountain.
Now,
Yes, like the fountain coming out. And I guess if I think about expressing your emotions is taking that chance. Like aces to me is an opportunity, right? It's like planting a seed. It's an opportunity to start something, to look at something different, to start something fresh and new, and maybe looking at expressing your feelings is more about wanting to learn how to express your feelings in a different way. I don't want to be angry all the time. So I'm going to start a new journey here on learning how not to be angry all the time. What is making me angry? How can I work on that so that I'm not walking around angry all the time, but I'm walking around being maybe more calm or maybe more peaceful or more optimistic or looking at things in a different way, as well as how can I incorporate more compassion into my life, compassion for myself, compassion for others, because I think the more that we can be compassionate to others, that helps us to just be happier with ourselves, and you're less likely to be fixated on so many of the other bad things that are going on or the negative things that are
Well,
going on around
I
you.
think when you're compassionate to other people, even if it's just thinking about, for instance, feeling empathy for the people that are going through all this stuff in California right now, it takes you out of yourself.
Yeah.
You think, oh, these poor people they're going to go back to a heap of ashes. There's going to be nothing left. And then you think, well, how would I feel if my house burned down? I mean, I have a friend whose house did burn down, and my mother's house burned down twice in her life. And so that's why I don't have a lot of family pictures from her side of the family, because they burned. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it helps you realize that even if is upsetting you is important to your life, it's not everything.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the last one for regulating your emotions, it was the Six of Swords. The swords are in the ocean. They're in the middle of the ocean, and the character is stepping on each of the swords, and the swords are like going out into the ocean, and the character is in the beginning and it's is moving out. And then there's dark clouds at the horizon. And the first thing I thought about is, very careful about how you're maneuvering these swords so that you don't fall into the ocean, which to me signifies your emotions, right? A sea of emotions. And how can you regulate your emotions is to be very conscientious of what your emotions are and how are you choosing to act, because how you choose to act is indicates how you are regulating or not regulating your emotions. You know what I mean? Like, how am I using what I know, right? Those swords. What do I know about my emotions? What do I know about me? What do I know about my actions when I'm upset about something or even very excited about something? What do I know, and how am I using that knowledge to help me bring forth who I really am in how I show you how I'm feeling? Does that make sense? I know sometimes I'm
Swords
like,
can, you talking about them walking on top of the sword. Swords can represent boundaries as well. And they probably aren't like super steady there, but if they do that a few times, they'll get better at it. I think
mhm,
with regulating, like knowing where your limits are, not so much protecting yourself from other people, but mastering your own boundaries, how they're standing on top of the swords, you
yeah,
know,
Right.
absolutely.
I'm just
and
saying,
being very
being able to
respectful.
say comfortably what's acceptable and what's not. Sometimes it's really hard.
Yeah,
The first time you say, this is not acceptable to me, that can
it's really
feel
scary
just
sometimes.
so
Yeah.
huge and frightening, but the more
Mhm.
you do it, the better you get at it. And the other thing
Mhm.
to remember is, aside from things that are like reflexes, where you hear a noise and you jump, or somebody comes up behind you and you have a reaction, everything that we react, or the way that we react emotionally, whether it's a low key or a disproportionately high key, it's a choice.
Yeah. And
It's a
it's hard, but
choice.
it's hard to recognize that when you are
It's hard to
feeling
recognize it,
triggered or
but it's a
attacked
choice.
or
It's a choice
mad.
for people to lose their temper over dinner being 5 minutes late and saying, "Oh, you made me mad." No, you chose to react that way.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in certain circumstances that doesn't apply. And I'm talking about more extreme circumstances.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, like somebody that has anger management issues,
Yeah.
sometimes they're just triggers and literally you don't even know
Yeah.
like what you're doing. It's just an instantaneous reaction to something. But once you do work through that, then you have the choice,
Yeah.
in how you're going to. But for the most part, for most of us in a common everyday life, we have choices about how we're going to react. And that
Yeah.
goes back to what we talked about yesterday when we were talking about this episode, is that pause, right? Is
Mhm.
when I feel I'm going to react or somebody says something that I don't like, or if something happens and I'm not happy about it and it's making me angry, it's to take that pause before you react,
Right.
right? And how
Yes.
important it is, because then that's where your choice comes in, right? You have a
Exactly.
And even to
choice to
say,
stop and pause.
this situation or this conversation is really upsetting me right now, and I need to
It's
step back. Even to
Yes.
say
and
that,
that's a skill that you
you
can
know,
learn, but not everyone is born knowing how to do that. And
yeah.
PTSD doesn't always manifest as being afraid or crying or falling into, it comes out as fucking anger sometimes.
Well,
Yes.
I know from
Or
my last ex, there were times when I knew she had PTSD pretty
Mhm.
bad for a number of reasons, and I learned that there were times when I had to be really careful about physically approaching her just to get her attention.
Mhm.
I kind of had to, like, I'm coming around the corner, I'm making noise if you happen to be doing something, because it would kind of send her into a tailspin, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't take it personally
Mhm.
because I didn't have anything to do with what happened that gave her PTSD,
Yeah,
but
I just wanted to
you
make
have to
sure
be
that our
aware of that.
listeners
And I
understand.
didn't know that at the beginning, and I learned that. But it's a two-way street. She was working on
Mhm.
it. She got better. I
Yep,
got better. But it
that's
is
the
what it
thing.
is.
It's not an overnight thing, and that's okay. Do your
Yeah.
best to do your best. That's all you
Yeah.
can do. And this is a nice little way to sit down and to check in with yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's small, little, like you start off
Mhm.
very basic and small, but the fact that you're willing to try it, the fact that you're willing to take the chance on understanding your emotions, knowing that it can be very difficult, right? You can come across emotions that you may not want to deal with. You may not want to know why, because it's hard and because it can hurt and because you're fearful, right? So having the courage to even start to do it is like yay,
Yay,
just
you.
try. Yeah, absolutely,
Mhm.
yay you, for being able to do that. And this is not something that is for everybody, right? If anybody does, like you were saying, PTSD, somebody had a very traumatic life, and you're suffering from
We're
any
not
kind of.
therapists.
Yeah. We're not
Exactly. We're
therapists.
not therapists, and I highly recommend therapy for anything.
Mhm. I think
You don't
everybody
have
should
to
have
have
therapy.
had, a huge, major traumatic childhood to do therapy.
Mhm.
Everybody can benefit from therapy. Everybody can. But to start off with,
With the right
smaller
therapist.
things
With
with
the
the
right
right
therapist.
therapist. It takes
That's an
time.
important thing. It does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've
If
gone to
you,
some that I'm like, oh, seem like a little too much
yeah,
of a wackadoo.
are you
I
really
don't think
a
so.
janitor? Like, are you just in this person's office?
She just
Yeah, I've
happened
had
to
a
be in
couple of
this
those.
office and we started
Yeah,
talking.
yeah, I've had a couple of encounters that way. So, if you have had some less than stellar experiences with that, keep trying. It's not therapy, it's just that you didn't click with that person, and that's okay. You
Yeah.
need to be very
Yeah.
comfortable with anybody you do this with. And if you are looking for a way to safely, in a solo way, begin to look at some of these things, tarot can be a really good gateway into that. Just don't put a lot of pressure on yourself to be
Right.
perfect about it, or not. And make sure that you listen, not to just that, because tarot is full of sass and straight talking, shooting from the hip advice, but it's also full of a lot of encouragement and a lot of love and a lot of patience and very good advice. It's not all always going to tell you hustle faster, work harder, you know. So make sure that if you sit down to do this, that you're ready to hear the bad and the good, because sometimes, especially when you're upset, you expect the bad. And if you pull a
Everything to
card
be
that you don't
bad.
like,
Right.
if you pull a card you don't like, you're like, well, of course I did, you know. So, you know, I
It's,
don't know,
it's,
just be gentle with yourself.
yeah,
Definitely.
that's a huge
Definitely.
part of it, is being gentle with yourself, having compassion for yourself, and yeah, just be kind to yourself.
Because
Let's be self.
we are in a lot of ways, we are way harder on ourselves than we are on other people. And
Mhm.
it, for
Well,
whatever
who's
reason,
more annoying than ourselves? Like, you can't get away from yourself. So of course you're going to get annoyed with yourself. Imagine any other person that you would have to be like this intimately close to 24/7 a day. You
yeah,
would eventually get a little bit like, would you stop breathing so hard or
Yeah,
whatever it
that keeps
is.
yapping in your head all the time.
Yeah.
It's always
right,
talking to
Mhm.
you, always talking to you. You know,
Right.
you're just like want
So
to say,
it's
shut the fuck up, get the fuck away from me. I
yes.
don't want you in my head anymore. At least that's how
It's
I feel.
much better to try to make friends with that part of yourself
Yes.
because that's
yeah.
Actually,
the thing to remember.
yeah. All right. Well, I think we have come to the end of our discussion on tarot for emotional regulation.
Thank
I
you all
hope you
for
guys
listening,
got
as
something good
always.
out of it and that you are using it to take good care of yourselves and each other.
Yeah. And especially now, and I hate to bring it up towards the end of our podcast, but this month of January is a pretty tense month, with the inauguration coming up and just, people might be having a lot of feelings and emotions regarding what's happening and, just take that pause, right?
Right,
Just think
right.
about that pause. Keep that word in your head of just pause before you react.
We
Just
wanted to
pause
do the
and think.
podcast. We wanted to do the podcast now because we wanted to give everybody a chance to pre-regulate their emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To understand yeah, like that's another great way to use this
Yeah,
technique that you brought today, Kate, is to I'm going into a situation that I know is going to be upsetting for me. How can I go armed with insight and be a little bit prepared?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anyway. All right, ladies, have a wonderful evening and we'll see each other next week.